Welcome to Good Grief, the podcast where resilience meets reality. I'm your host, Dr. Christine Malone. In this podcast, we delve deep into the stories of individuals who've triumphed over tragedy, adversity, and trauma. In every episode, we bring you raw and honest narratives from guests who faced life's most challenging moments head on. Through candid conversations, they share their journeys of resilience, shedding light on the strategies, mindset shifts, and support systems that empowered them to rise above their darkest hours. Join us as we explore the profound depths of human resilience and discover how, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and yes, good grief. Okay, listeners, thank you so much for joining me for my episode today. My guest is Holly Peppe. She is an author, poet, teacher, and mentor who started as a Woodstock hippie and taught music in a rural elementary school in Vermont. She went on to pursue academic degrees in English, specializing in writing and poetry, and taught for 10 years in high schools and colleges. She was headhunted for a career in writing and PR for a global nonprofit that brought ophthalmologists to developing countries to teach eye surgery to host countries. I think that's fabulous. And then spent 8 years working in other countries, and then came back to the US, started her own PR firm in New York, worked with nonprofits, and so on. So what we're going to talk about, though, is post the 2016 diagnosis of stage 4 breast cancer, and then how have things been going since then. So Holly, thank you for being my guest. And if you would like to just tell us anything about yourself that I didn't include.
Okay, well, you're very welcome. It's lovely to be here. And yes, I did all that in my past. I was very active. So I was pretty shocked in 2016 when I got this diagnosis. I had a stomach ache and I had a colonoscopy, and they found they found cancer. First of all, they thought it was colon cancer. And then after many other tests, they found out it was breast cancer. So I was diagnosed in 2016 with stage 4 breast cancer right off the bat. I was in total shock because, of course, I'd never been sick. I've been traveling around the world. I'd done all this. I had my own PR agency in New York, consultancy in New York, and very active. And so I was a little shocked at what to do. And I think when I think about grief, the first thing I did was start grieving for my life because I thought, is it over? And I did think it was over. Now, luckily, and because of the incredible medical benefits that we all have in developed countries, I should say, I was on an oral medication for 8 years and it kept me stable. And so that was pretty amazing. I didn't have many side effects. So, and I didn't forget about the cancer, but I thought, well, I guess maybe I'm overcoming this. But then 2 years ago, I started having some side effects. I wasn't sure if they were side effects, but anyway, I had some symptoms. And they diagnosed leptomeningeal disease, which is cancer in the cerebral spinal fluid. And there's no way to get to that because it's not a tumor. You can't see it. The only way they can determine what's happening is through spinal taps. So that's the short version. And for the past 2 years, I go in every 6 or 8 weeks and I have another spinal tap. And these number of cancer cells goes up and down. But the key to this disease is it only affects 3 to 5% of cancer patients in the final stages of cancer, in lung cancer and breast cancer and a few others. And there's no cure. So I think when they first got that news, I thought, well, that can't be so. There must be a cure. But then after research and after, talking with people who had the disease, and I knew 2 women who had it who died within 6 months. So the prognosis was 6 months to a year. So that's my backstory. It was at that point that I decided, well, I only have this much time. I better get moving. And some of the things I dreamed about doing, I'd better do them right away. So I will say I never despaired. I just thought this is like it was a reason to act.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing I did, I live on a lake and I have wonderful swans, and I named the 2 swans Romeo and Juliet, the couple on the lake. And swans stay together for life.
Yeah.
They were so beautiful. And they came over and I started feeding them these pellets, these very luxury pellets, I should say, health food pellets. And then they brought their children over. So for 5 years, Romeo and Juliet, we really bonded. And my husband and I would go down near the lake and they would come swimming over or flying over. And anyway, it was a really lovely bond between, nature and the humanity. And so I wrote a book, and it's actually a book that's an anti-bullying book about the two swans, about Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
And it's called Sophie and the Swans. And
Yeah.
there's a young man in the book who's a bully. He's over here.
Okay.
And the two main characters are Sophie and another boy whose name is Sam. So Sophie and Sam get together and they manage to save Ned, the bully, when he's out on the lake, just out of kindness. And the whole story is about kindness and how kindness can alleviate bullying, or at least show a bullying child that
Yeah.
there's another way to live.
Yeah.
And so I'm very happy about the fact that it's now the children seem to love the book. They all get the message. And the first time I read it to some children who came over, and one little boy picked up and finished reading it to his little brother, and then looked up at me and his mom, who was here, and said, I was bullied in school.
Mm.
And that was the first time, and I thought, okay, this book can make a difference.
Yes.
So that was one of my projects that I'm very proud of and very happy to. And I read it to the children in their library, the local library. It
Yeah.
was lovely.
That's a great topic for kids. I mean, kids can be absolutely cruel. I think I mentioned before we started recording, I had one of my kids was bullied, and yeah, it's not a good thing. And I think yeah, for kids to be able to read that or have it read to them or whatever, what a great history that is. So, do you feel like I know you do a lot of writing with poetry and so on, that has that changed since your diagnosis, or how has your writing changed, or is it altered or some way with since your illness?
No, my writing hasn't changed, but I'm doing more of it because
Uh,
it's just so important. I want to get certain messages out because
Right.
I figure, that I feel like the silver lining to having a terminal disease is that you really have to let everything that's superfluous go and focus on what matters.
Right.
And matters to me is I spent all those years in developing countries, you could see from my bio. And my mother was a nurse, and her philosophy was you need to do something every day for someone who can never repay you.
Mm.
And I thought that was really interesting. So I kind of grew up with that philosophy, which is that your mission, it's not a religious mission, it's not a spiritual mission. It just in this life, if you can do something for someone else, do it.
Mhm.
And if you have extra, give what you have away. You don't need everything. So, without sounding Pollyanna-ish, it's more that I wanted to do something that would matter. So writing this book, which was a challenge because I wasn't feeling well a lot of the time, really, I felt like I was doing something that mattered and
Yeah.
that might carry on and that would, have some legs to it after I was gone.
Yeah.
So that was that. And then my poetry book, which I mentioned, after I did that book, I have written poetry ever since I was a child. When I was 5 years old, I wrote my first poem. My mother, put it in her bedroom drawer. But I never published my poetry, and I've written hundreds of poems, and I've published many books for other people. But I finally decided, okay, this is the silver lining of this. I've got to get my poetry together. So
Yeah.
I put together like almost 100 poems in a
Yeah.
book called The Absence of Fear. And in the book, some of them are very old and 30 years old, and others are new because I do have some cancer poems
Oh, okay. That was gonna be my
about
question.
having
Yeah.
cancer,
Yeah.
and so that's been very rewarding. So that was my second project, and this project is really more for me than anyone else, but I'm finding that it's getting some resonance with people, and especially people who have cancer.
Oh, yeah. I would imagine
And
so.
some friends and family, but also I try to take a light, believe it or not, a kind of a light view of cancer. If you like, I'll read you one of the poems
Yes, that would be great.
that I don't like to be negative and I don't want to be maudlin, but I also think that there's another way to look at things.
Hmm. I agree with that.
This poem is called Hospital Waiting Room. Everyone here is lung or bone or colon or unknown, except one guy, big shots show off, who keeps bragging about liver. I'm breast stage 4. I say nothing. It's cutthroat, this competition. Until pancreas returns from radiology, I usually win. It's kind of silly on the one hand. On the other hand, this is what it is to have cancer. I'll read you
Yeah.
one more, and that's called Terminal Benefits. It's not so bad, really. You eat whatever you want. Avoid people you don't like. Let's wait till next year, you say, when I'm feeling better. It's kind of nice, really. You look at the sunset and beauty fills you up. How lovely, you think. I'll remember this forever.
Hmm. That's beautiful. That's absolutely beautiful. We are going to, I know I mentioned to you before we started recording, but I want to make sure my listeners know we are going to be linking to your books in our podcast notes so they can find you should they want to read your work. Do you have other stuff in the works right now? Are you working on another poetry book? What are your plans?
Well, I have a whole series of books. I'm the literary executor still for Edna St. Vincent Millay,
Okay.
the Jazz Age poet.
Okay.
And I've done many essays for Yale University Press, introductions, and all kinds of other essays for them over the years. And so these two books were a real departure for me, the children's book and my poetry book, because as a poetry scholar, it's all very academic and so now I've veered off and now I just want to write personal things.
Hmm.
So I may do a second version, like a follow-up to the Swans book.
Hmm.
Um, or I may do something else. I'm really in the process of figuring out what that would be.
Yeah.
I don't like to write about cancer, actually. I mean, I wrote the poems about cancer, but I feel like there's so many cancer books out there. And
There
since
are.
I had cancer, I've read most of them. And most of them, they're not uplifting, but some of them are. When Breath Becomes Air, there are a couple of books out there that are really wonderful. But I don't think I'm that useful in talking about cancer. I have advice for people with cancer, and that is stay positive and do what you love and think of something that you've always wanted to do and do it.
Mhm.
Figure out how to do it. It doesn't cost money. This is about time.
Yeah.
I think that getting a diagnosis like this really puts you in a new space where you've never lived before because you never had to worry about that. I remember my mother used to say the tragedy of being young is that the young do not appreciate their youth. And I think that's probably true. But
Yeah.
I think also being old, sometimes you don't appreciate the fact that you're still here. So get moving,
Yeah.
do
Do
something.
something. Yes.
But
Yes.
like I'm not a person who retired and do nothing.
Yeah.
I retired and now I'm still working on
Right.
something that is important to me and I hope will
Right.
help the world in some way.
Yeah. Well, it's fantastic. I appreciate you being my guest today, Holly. It's been a wonderful time meeting you and hearing your story and hearing about your books. I made notes of them myself so I can find them because I want to read them myself. So I'll check that out. But thank you so much for your time today.
And my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Good Grief. We hope that the stories shared today have inspired and empowered you on your own journey of resilience. If you want to dive deeper into the themes of trauma, tragedy, and survival, be sure to check out my memoir, The Day I Became the Spider Killer, a memoir of trauma, tragedy, and survival. In this book, I shared my own raw and honest experiences, offering insights and strategies for overcoming life's toughest challenges. You can purchase the book on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or listen to it on Audible. Your support helps us continue to bring these powerful stories to light and spread a message of hope and resilience. Stay tuned for more incredible stories on our next episode. Until then, remember, even in the face of life's toughest trials, there can be light, growth, and good grief.